Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to our first edition of Rrvenue Acts, organized by Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech. I'm Benedicte Ollagnon and delighted to be here to moderate this session dedicated to segments, evolution for the segments in the future, distribution, and strategy. I'm going to be here with 5 great experts who cannot wait to be here to exchange with you. A few first housekeeping first. We don't have a crystal ball here. We know that we're not in a good situation. It's not getting any better, but there are some little signs, some little decisions may be made, big decisions made by some governments around the world. France, for example, has announced the possible end of the confinement on the 11th of May. So maybe some things are going to start changing in the next few weeks. So here you're not going to get precise answers. You're going to get a debate on some topics that are very dear to all our experts. And we hope that you will find the exchange interesting and at least will trigger some questions for your future strategy for your hotels. The first thing I would like to do here is to get everybody please to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Ali, please.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. I'm Ali Northfield. I'm the Managing Director of Rrvenue by Design. We produce training courses for hotels, and we also run revenue management outsource solutions for a number of properties, both in the UK and internationally. Handing back.
Right.
My turn then?
Yeah.
So I'm Berengere. I'm a founder of MyOC, which is my optimizer consulting. So consulting company doing outsourced revenue management and commercial strategies. So helping hotels across Europe and Americas on different strategies to optimize revenues and processes.
And then I'm Khristina, I'm Group Revenue Manager for JMK Group, who own and operate a number of hotels between the UK and Ireland. I liaise with all the properties on a one-to-one basis, training and development, obviously optimization, revenue generation, with a keen interest in assisting everybody else with it as well.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Olga. I bring over 10 years of experience in revenue management, worked for large corporations like Accor, Hilton, GLH, but also worked in smaller boutique properties. A couple of years ago was awarded Katie's Revenue Manager of the Year. Been involved with opening, closing of the hotel, so quite broad experience. And in my last role, been covering for Director of Revenue, deputizing for Director of Revenue for Europe, overlooking 23 hotels and a total revenue of rooms of 120 million pounds. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Susanne Williams. I am the Revenue and Systems Director for Journey here in Cheltenham. We are a marketing and tech agency. I have over 25 years experience in the business as a general manager, so very hands-on operationally. I've been a Director of Sales and Marketing and Director of Revenue. Handing back.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, ladies. And what I would like to do is just remind, I forgot a few housekeeping. The main one is we would like this debate today and this discussion to be open to everybody who is currently watching us or listening. So if you could please post your question, your comments, or your tips, we will make sure we're monitoring them and addressing them during the session. So starting with our subject today, so we're going to focus on the segments. And really, Ali, I was wondering, could you maybe give us a first impression of what's happening with the segments and what signs are you already seeing that there may be some changes coming?
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I think from our team's perspective and from the hotels that we work with, the key thing at the moment is to work out which segments we've got and which segments we haven't. And I think it's pretty obvious from an initial review of how people can travel in the future, what kind of travel restrictions will be in place, that certainly the international travel segment, both transient and group, is likely to be depressed for a significant amount of time. There's, in terms of moving into sort of the transient sector, certainly from a corporate perspective, I think there's a little bit of a mixed reaction in terms of how corporates will respond to coming back to the market. I think there's a level of responsibility that that head office has in terms of sending corporate travellers out. So there has to be some level of reassurance, I think, from the hotel's point of view, that we can actually manage to keep corporate travellers safe. So on the one hand, you have this element of insecurity of that segment purely because of the risk associated with travelling. On the other hand, there are some corporate sectors that just have to work. They'd have to return to work. And so for those people, they have to travel as well. So I'm thinking of people that are responsible for telecommunications, upgrading any kind of infrastructure in any country, those type of people that typically have to travel. So that would be the corporate sector. From the leisure point of view, I think all hands are pointing in the right direction, that the leisure sector is likely to be the first to return. So my thoughts would be, firstly, look out for future business from that particular segment, and also be aware that other segments need to have a lot more, well, every segment needs flexibility, but what I was going to say was other segments where you feel that they're unlikely to return is to offer them some level of flexibility at the moment to allow them to take those choices in travel. I know you guys have a lot more sort of distribution side of things to say, so I'm not going to necessarily point to segments such as any of the OTAs or FITs. So if anybody wants to pick up on any of those, then do go ahead.
I think what's quite interesting about what you said, Ali, is about how many hotels actually fully understand the business mix, so that they can identify what areas for growth are. And if what has been transient corporate or contracted corporate has been a big segment before, then it's about reviewing that and making sure, particularly with your contracted corporates, that the relationships are maintained and that communication is ongoing. Because whilst it's very difficult right now, when that travel starts to return, like you say, the companies are going to want to know that the travel's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Has anybody, I mean, certainly from our point of view, we're seeing that we still have quite positive pickup from August onwards. So looking at pickup by market segment and pace by market segment, certainly the leisure segment's holding out quite well for the August and onwards period. Having said that, we are getting cancellation waves depending on which country we're in or managing, and certainly even in the UK, which region. So the cancellation waves in London have kind of like stopped being as drastic as they were, irrespective of the segment. And we then saw a pickup in pace of cancellations in the regions. Those have now quietened down. This week, we're seeing the first sort of negative pace of cancellations. So I'm not sure what you guys are seeing as well, whether or not just in terms of the ability to track market segments. So a lot of hotels don't have that, but also the pace of behaviour of each segment, cancellations versus pickup. Any thoughts on that?
I think I've noticed especially that London is starting to recover. I'm going to say recover in a way, but slowly. We're not going to have business between now and July for sure. I think August will be a very, very soft month. You're probably looking at the same pretty much around March time. It's going to be very domesticated. You know, September onwards, traditionally was always really good for corporates. And I think the same thing in Ireland. To say that I've spoken to a lot of hoteliers, and some of them are seeing that, you know, as you're saying, the decline in the amount of cancellations. I do think it's because the majority of people have done that big bulk of cancellation, and you'll only see that increase again if A, the property is closed out and is cancelling the bookings, or B, that, you know, this gets extended and people haven't actually cancelled their bookings. bookings. And I don't think, to be fair as well, it's been the property's fault or anyone else's fault. You know, we're all under this pressure, but I don't think our partners in the OTA world has really helped us out. Globally saying to people that if your booking was before the 6th of April for the whole year, you can cancel free of charge because of force majeure. You know, changing rates to semi-flex or even flexible rates, saying that you're able to get your money doesn't help either. I do think that if the lockdown gets extended past, you'll have won't travel. But as you said, the most important people we should be focusing on at the moment is on the domestic and also on the corporate traveller who is going to be traveling, because essential services will come back. You know, and that's the big thing, is that it's essential services. You know, Spain has opened the doors to essential services this week. Italy is following suit. Austria is doing the same. And I think we need to be mindful as hoteliers that the rates that we're charging or that we're looking for could be wish rates rather than want rates. When it comes to dealing with domestic market and corporates, and we need to be focusing as well on probably renegotiating our rates and relooking at our rates, because, you know, what we were looking for 6 weeks ago isn't the same as what we're going to end up looking for in 6 weeks' time.
I think there's also the group segment, to be honest, to be looking at, because from what I've seen from some clients currently is that there are still some requests for groups, and it's coming back. So typically we've had some requests for WTM, and there's been a massive demand there, and it will definitely come back. It's more about making sure that you have the right group strategy and probably some more flexibility, yes, but or a different way to handle groups, whether it's individual groups or corporate groups. You will have to think about the approach that you have with them, and that will be completely different. They're not going to confirm tomorrow, so it's going to be a longer process, I guess. But as soon as this is coming back, we all know that groups are a good base most of the time. So it may be a bit more domestic than international for now, but definitely, and I'm going to be optimistic here, in 1 year's time, we're going to have the internationals back. So we need to be prepared for that. Also, they have a longer lead time.
Do you think, Berengere, the domestic will be the first one to come back?
In terms of what? In terms of,
overall.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, everybody's saying it, and that makes sense. As Ali was saying, there are some travel restrictions. So just because of that, for sure, it's going to be a domestic business coming back first. But that said, we have to be prepared to make sure that when international business is coming back, we have everything in place also to get the right business with the right pricing, etc. So I think one thing that the hotels need to really work on currently is, if you have a CRM system, amazing, then you can know straight away where business is coming from, etc. But we know that a lot of the hotels, and a lot of hotels that are going to struggle even more than the others, like the small hotels, basically, they have other choices. They have information from their PMS. They have Google Analytics. So there are some tools where they can really try to target where is my business coming from. And based on that, I'm going to try to tap even more into that business, for example, or how can I grow some other business when I don't know, if you have only 50% of domestic, for example, right? How can I focus on these 50%, and then what's the other bigger ones?
I really like you starting to give some tips and things of actually what hoteliers can do right now to get ready for the future. So maybe for you, Khristina, what are you currently doing, and what would be your recommendation to hoteliers? What can they do now?
Well, I think the most important thing is that I understand that everyone is on furlough and we're all on leave, or we're taking 2 days a week. But it's important that in that space of time that we really concentrate on the future, or plan basically a recovery strategy. And what I've been doing over the past while, and what I've been recommending, is that we all look at the rates that we're charging, where you dissect the rate, though. You're actually using your PMS or using your analytical data to actually go through what rates work for you, what promotions work for you, what hasn't in the past, so that you're not making the same mistake again. Looking at OTA partners, updating the content, but also looking at the partners to see who delivers the best business at what time, looking at the lead-in times. All this stuff is really important that we just haven't had time to do. because we're just so focused on revenue, increasing rates, decreasing rates, what our comp set is doing. Look at your comp set, completely analyze. This is the time now where you change your comp set and your STR to match what you and your hotel team feel is your correct comp set, because you could have been comparing apples to oranges rather than apples to apples in the past. Plan your social media, e-signs, your marketing, your sales plans. You need to do this now, and you need to stay in the moment. You know, just because you're closed, that doesn't mean you don't proactively post on social media. It's only keeping in the moment, keeping with hotels, and you're kind of keeping that customer engagement. Also imagery, fix your imagery, your content score, your OTAs now depend on that. Also look at, you know, being able to readjust your blackout dates. Towards the end of the year, we're not really going to have any blackout dates. Euro 2020 has been cancelled. We've seen a lot of big concerts cancelled across the UK and Ireland, and big events. So the need for blackout dates isn't really there anymore. And I think we need to be more mindful of the rates, as I said a while ago, but looking at changing your advanced purchase to a semi-flex, where, you know, or even having a semi-flex there, where 3 days out, it automatically becomes a non-refundable. So you're still giving the customer that chance to cancel the booking if they need to. Now, I know that means we're not going to have that bankable revenue we know for sure is going to actually drive our business. But at the same time, you're a lot more flexible than what your comp set is doing. Because I can tell you not many comp sets are doing this, because a lot of the branded channels are trying to do it at the moment, but all they're doing is actually changing the best flex into a stay now, or pay now, book now, pay later. And at least it gives you some sort of an idea that you will have bankable revenue towards the end of it.
But do you think it's the right thing to do, actually, to do the buy now, pay later? I mean, we know that all the hotels have issues with cash flow currently. So is there a way to change that a little bit? Like it can be not called prepaid, or it's prepaid now, but it's actually a flexible rate that people can change afterwards. I mean, there are some ways to change the way we create those rates. It's not like moving only to flex, 100% flex, because...
No, and I wouldn't recommend going to 100% flex. That's what all the OTAs are trying to get us to do at the moment, is be flexible with everybody and allow everyone to cancel right away. You know, the idea behind a semi-flex is that you give that customer up to whatever amount of days prior to arrival to make that decision if they're going to cancel the booking, and then automatically it becomes a chargeable booking to you within that period of time. So, you know, you look flexible, but at the same time, you're still getting your revenue once they're outside of that cancellation policy. And I think it's a great idea to be able to do that, because then you've got a better foot to stand on at the moment, because you were able to give them time to cancel it. You know, we all know these lockdowns happen 3 weeks in advance. It wasn't a case of, obviously, the first time around, it was very short-lived. But, you know, we're now getting information that it is 2 and 3 weeks out, so you can still cancel it if you need to. Whereas, you know, our AP for a long time has been very much, sorry, you can't cancel it. And now all of a sudden, because of this pandemic, everything comes under the magical words, force majeure, and we've lost all our revenue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Khristina. While we are on pricing, I would like us to answer the question from Claudia. And thank you, Claudia, for posting the first question. What about the pricing strategy for the near future? And in regards to the longer terms, do you think that hotels will write prices to cover some of the corona losses? Who would like to take this question?
I think that's highly unlikely. I think that if you are tracking your data and you're looking ahead and you see what's spiking, then you can make sure that you plan correctly and that you forecast. Although right now, you know, forecasting is folly, that's my mantra. But you should make sure that you have some measure of what's going on, enough time ahead to plan the pricing. I cannot see hotels raising the pricing to try and mitigate some of the costs. It's just not what
I would agree with that. I think it's more of pricing right now accurately, and also we need to be mindful that yes, domestic market will be first probably to bounce back, and all the hotels lost their base business. So I don't think hotels will be actually in the positions to cover some of those losses by increasing, for example, prices. That's how I read the question. But looking into the further future, then 2021, actually, as we said, all the events moved to 2021. So having that, blackout days, the right strategy for next year will be absolutely crucial across all segments. And to the point that was already mentioned in regards to the groups, leisure groups are actually very strong right now. For August, September, October, seems to be that key period that actually groups are booking and confirming right now. And then the rest, actually, the more businesses coming for 2021. So that seems to be the two key periods that seem to be becoming more and more important right now.
One of the things I think is just important to flag up with the pricing question is that your value proposition, your price versus value. Now is a really good time to look very closely at every aspect of your business to make sure, ask someone else to do it, get some staff that are still working, review your website, look at your competition. Where do you really sit in that your comp set, and are you priced accordingly? Be honest about what you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think also
there's the expectation versus reality for sure. And I think when you're dealing with your competitor set, I think you need to be very mindful that you don't have to have that massive gap between you and your comp set and rate. You don't have to be the cheapest of the cheap, because sometimes being too cheap can give that perception that there's something wrong with your property as well. And I think you need to, like I said, very mindful of who your comp set are. And as Susanne said, they're the value of your property. So important. And I think we need to again be focusing on the value of domestic market, because we know that everyone is coming out of the back of an economic crisis as well as a pandemic, where a lot of us have been either furloughed or we've been laid off or we've been made redundant. So our spending power isn't as much there, but we still want to get away. And I think that's to be key focusing on as well, and focusing on family getaways. It's something that we independent hotels can do quite well, but big chains can't do. Big brands don't really have the power or the mindset to do that. So I think that's where the hotels themselves need to focus a lot more on driving their social media and saying, we are great for families. We are great for, mini breaks. And now's the time to do it, and package something with a zoo, or, change your content to suit that.
100%.
I'd say overall,
and I think
just to comment on the pricing there, that it's great for us all to have individual strategies, either value-based propositions or great add-ons. But the industry in the past has never worked its way out of severe crises, particularly enthusiastically when it comes to looking at ADR. Typically, the driver, which will be the owner's driver, has tended to be in the past an occupancy strategy, which does mean reduction in rate. So it doesn't. So I think the mantra has to be, let's make it an ADR driven exit strategy, not an occupancy driven exit strategy. Because if it is an occupancy driven one, it doesn't matter how hard you try as an individual hotel, you'll be driven by the market. And it's irrespective of where you want your pricing to be, what your value proposition wants to be, whatever. It's going to depend on really good leadership. So I'm looking to owners, GMs, commercial managers to put it out there that revenue managers are okay, and it's perfectly fine to work with an ADR strategy, and it's not going to be a problem if the hotel doesn't fill every day, because if we're not getting leadership, we will not get out of this at all.
Mm-hmm. So you're almost changing, and we need to come back to this topic, but the role of the revenue manager will probably change in the near future, and leadership will become even more important. I think this will link very nicely to next week topic as well. We need to add it on. I just want to go back to Berengere. You made your point earlier about the different markets, and we had a question, which has now disappeared, but I'm going to try to remember, which was, and I'm sorry for whoever asked the question, I can't see who you are, but regarding which first international market will come back to London? Do you have visibility with any of your property, or maybe for you, Khristina, do you have any visibility on that?
I think there's no crystal ball really, and it all depends on what segmentation your hotel has already. I mean, you'll be a 5-star hotel in central London in Mayfair. You're going to look at the Emirates, and you're going to be a hotel in another location. You're going to have other different countries. So as we were saying earlier, each country will apply will unlock the countries at different times. So it's super hard. I mean, I think that the Asian market may normally come back first, because they'll be they want they'll be released of that earlier than us. US may be the latest one, but those are the big markets, and it just all depends on what the politicians will do actually, and let us do and travel. And then of course, I think, without falling into stereotypes, there are still like some differences also in people and how they what they will want out of that crisis, like sanitary and health and safety and those kind of things are perceived a bit differently also. So we need to make sure that we're smart enough in the hotels and also talk to each of our clients and markets in the way that we reassure them and make sure that we do everything they're expecting us to do.
Great.
I think there should be a key focus on the fact that it's going to be very, as Berengere said, that it's going to be Europe mainly that's going to come back because they're close to us, they're close neighbours. So I don't think there will be that travel restriction in place in regards to, you know, going into quarantine for a period of time, because I think that's something we all need to keep in the back of our mindset, is that even China at the moment, although it's open, you can still travel there if you have a permit to travel, but you still have to go into quarantine when you go to certain areas if you're an international traveller. So I think that's something we need to all be mindful of, that could actually be put in place for the UK and Ireland for the future, especially in countries where the pandemic is still rife, if you want to put it that way. I think, you know, the day trips in and out of London for our corporate clients, the overnight stays for the next maybe month or so are completely gone. I know that I actually travel between the UK and Ireland, and unless you are an essential worker or you've got a permit to kind of say that you do need to be there, no one is flying at the moment. You know, and I think that's something that we need to monitor as well, is how the countries deal with them situations, especially, and companies. And, you know, it is, you are correct in saying you need to reach out to the clients and you need to reach out to the companies and say, you know, how are you getting on? How's everything with you? That's one thing I've been doing over the last few weeks, is trying to keep in contact with pretty much everyone that we normally would deal business with, just to make sure that A, they're okay and they know that they're appreciated by us, but B, to see what's their thought process and what's happening in, you know, the HR office and the travel office, and what's the CEO saying for the future. Because again, we all could have conferences on the books for October, November and December, and we want to know what's the chances of them happening, and even for August, or we've pushed dates out. So you need to keep that back and forth as well.
Stay on this subject, Khristina. We have, thank you, Yayeneke, for sending your question about the blackout dates for 2021. So should we increase the blackout dates for 2021 now that a lot of the events have been moved? Or is this going to put us at risk by losing some corporate agreements?
I think a lot of the stuff to do with corporate agreements, you can only have 30 blackout dates anyway. So you need to pick and choose what ones you want to apply. I think if you're trying to outsmart the market and outsmart the customer, you're only going to do this to your own detriment. You've lost your business for this year. So you need to kind of, you know, you need to understand what next year is going to bring. Obviously, next year is going to be better. We're all going to have a fantastic March, April and May. We're all going to do really well. That's how positive I am about it, because it can't be worse than what we are in now. But, you know, the likes of the Euro 2021s, which has all been, or 2020, which is now 2021, for sure, protect them dates, because obviously then people will travel. But my thought process behind that at the moment is, you know, a lot of hotels have given their allocations to booking.com for this. Do you really need to have the allocations for next year? Think of all these different ideas, but me personally, I'm not going to increase all the blackout dates. I'm going to pick and choose what ones are the most important ones, the ones that we normally would apply, and go from there. Because you can't give a customer 50 or 60 blackout dates just because everything that was supposed to happen in 2020 is moved to 2021. Because you know what, your competitor next door is probably not going to even have a blackout date, or they might do my idea, which is only apply the minimum. I don't know what everyone else feels about this, so.
I think over the years, kind of blackout dates, I agree that with corporates, you're only restricted to a small number of dates. As you said, it's 30 days maximum, some RFPs even less so. Hotels already been moving away, possibly offering higher rates over this special event dates rather than blackout dates. Kind of at the end of the day, it's also a relationship. It's a long game. It's a relationship as well with partners, especially with corporate accounts. FIT the same. So having possibly higher rate or event supplements works better, and you can still manage it to a certain degree.
I agree with you, because, you know, I think they're fair rates, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and we can apply a discount on fare rates as well, which always works. I think that works better for the customer instead of saying, look, you're completely shut out. You know, this is 20% off bar or 30% off bar, depending on the price that you're charging at the time. Because I'm saying that amount of a discount because sometimes we can be charging $299, $399, depending on the event. But it's about explaining to the customer also, though, that these days are in demand. It's a fair date, and just applying that, you need to kind of have a reason behind it, especially when you're doing your contracts for next year.
I think you will have to explain very carefully, because I don't think the corporate travel managers are going to have a lot of, I mean, their volume, their demand is going to be lower. They're going to have more choices. And I think they will find it difficult to understand why the hotels want to charge more. But I think if it's explained in the right way, that we're trying to survive here and we're trying to make the best as we can as partners, that will definitely help. I would like to go back to, we've done already quite a lot of tips of what the hoteliers, the revenue managers should be doing now. Is there anything else you would recommend, anybody of best practice you've seen? I mean, we may not be in a hotel for 5 days, but for the few days that we may be sitting in a hotel, what else could be done?
I'm going back to the group leisure group segment. I would like to mention that so far having your reservations teams and group reservations teams right now working possibly full time, even if they work from home, taking calls and answering emails, there is actually still a lot of demand and a lot of inquiries. And I think hotels need to respond to that. Otherwise, they're going to lose the business. And yes, it is securing right now contracts for next year or the autumn. But you need to have that force. You need to be able to be there. Someone needs to answer those inquiries. Because if you don't, then it will go to hotel next door.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I think we should focus on data cleaning. Data cleaning, PMS, actually looking at your market segments. Everyone here in this, it's great about this panel. We all think the same way when it comes to market segments and tracking the data and tracking the business. Make sure all your rate codes are built correctly. They're set up to the right segmentation. Merge profiles. How many hotels have thousands and thousands of profiles? The same person has so many duplicates. Now is the time to have whoever's sitting there, because obviously we need to have a night team running the night audits, or whoever's doing security in your properties. Show them how to merge. Get them to merge all the profiles so that each person only has one profile and we're not picking up so many individuals. And that means you're able to actually have a less bulkier PMS, be it a cloud or on a server. And again, structure your business, know where your business is coming from, your market segments, make sure your OTAs are all structured correctly as well. Because, you know, when you go back, you'll want to know exactly what segments are growing rapidly or declining rapidly and where the next piece of business is going to come from.
Yeah, I think it's really important, the segmentation, really, because lots of hotels are trying to do the minimum amount of rate codes, which we've heard that like, oh, it's cleaner, etc. But in reality, it makes it much easier when you drill down to the level of distribution. For example, you don't have to have all your bar, let's say, in only one rate code. Like, yeah, what does it mean? I've got on X% of bar. Like, where is it coming from? Is it your GDS? Is it your direct website? Is it your meta search, etc.? So having a clear understanding of where business is coming from will be really key to be able to target the ones that are bringing you the best net revenue also end of the day.
Ali, would you be able to take this question from William? Thank you very much, William, for this, because we've been talking a lot about it, but now in what logical order should we tackle all these tasks?
So we have rates, comp analysis, channels, markets, guest data, and images. So I think some of the most pressing items to do first would be certainly just managing the rates and your channels to market, basically, because of the fact that the OTAs are changing their policies just in the very, very immediate short term quite regularly. And also the requirement, as we've mentioned in different iterations, to balance the customer need for flexibility versus your need to have less risk put on you for losing revenues through ad hoc cancellations with very little reason. So I think there's an element of basically perhaps logically looking to the very near future and keeping things very flexible, and then as you move out into the future, managing those rates, and then sort of reincorporating some level of getting business on the books and some revenue in for future profitability, as we move further out into sort of August, September, October. I think some of the challenges of managing channels is rate parity, because as OTAs change some of their policies regarding prepaid rates and cancellation policies, it can kick you out of parity through and without realizing at times. So you just have to be super careful on that. So you need something really to manage your parity, because that still is important. Whether or not that's going to be as important on the other side of this, I don't know, but typically it has been, obviously, in the past. Competitor analysis, I would be looking at alongside pricing at all times. Certainly in terms of picking up on what Khristina was saying regarding your reviewing your comp set, I think the way your competitors behave now will give you a very true indication of how well they manage a revenue strategy. So just really being honest with your comp set and whether or not you really want to follow their lead, or which is never a good idea, but you know what I mean, if they're actually sort of really not following what you want to do, then do swap them out. In terms of guest data, that's and managing which markets are your own is very much a case of whether you had everything set up correctly in the first place. Unfortunately, if you've got a really, really nasty looking PMS with horrible data in it, it's going to take you a while to sort it out. But I think for those hotels that have really good clean data, they'll be very much stronger emerging out of this in the future, because they'll be able to manage all of their new segmentation. They'll be able to look at pace analysis much more easily. So it's kind of, I guess, that the real answer is probably all at once right now, because we have a bit more time.
Yeah.
But certainly separate projects for guest data, managing source markets, looking at image quality, that's something that should be done, particularly if you feel that there are people within the property that perhaps are not furloughed and need extra projects to do.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Any
Thank you.
Thoughts?
Well,
Yep.
plenty to do.
Also, probably looking at the production reports, because we often, I think, sold the idea of a pipeline rather than their actual reality and the production, and possibly having so many channels as we used to have. Is it really necessary? Because maybe you should focus and follow 80-20% rule, and focus on what actually will bring most results. So yeah, there is plenty to do right now in this time.
Lovely. And we have a question. Thank you, Anna, for asking on the expand of the role of the revenue manager. So I think we will definitely still need revenue managers now, that's for sure. But asking about digital marketing, and I know, Susanne, that's something you were quite keen to take on. So would you like to expand of what hotels could be doing?
Yeah, I think that revenue management actually is more important now than before, because as we go into the next 6 months, understanding the periods of demand, the lead times and the segments that are picking up is really important, and is the foundation of your sales and marketing plan. It will drive your communications with your local corporates. It will enhance your rates, and it will help you predict and plan your profitability. Digital marketing and distribution is another big question about what's going to change. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to change. But my big question is digital marketing versus the OTAs. If you invest in digital marketing, you sort out your guest experience, you look at your website, your booking engine and your value proposition, you've got a lot of opportunity to drive that direct business. And the thing for me really about the OTAs is how we as hoteliers, and particularly small hoteliers, how we challenge the dominance of the OTAs, and whether that's something that we should be doing. We know that when the green shoots of recovery come back, will be very excited and will want to give inventory to everyone. But is that really the right thing to do? I would say no. And I guess for me, I've been looking at the cost of acquisition for your business and whether it's OTA or a proper digital marketing plan. And for me, it's digital marketing.
Yeah.
So
And right now there is more focus more than ever on the direct business, and that's a perfect way how to capture that direct business. So it's absolutely, I would agree absolutely with that statement, definitely.
Yeah, it's a perfect time to change the habits also, just to make sure that
Yeah.
you have the right things in place, because we're all a little bit scared sometimes to change the way we're working. We don't want to get rid of some of the corporates, for example, because we know that they're bringing a lot of revenue. But on the other hand, now that we don't have any business, like, okay, what's my ideal mix and where do I want to be in a year, 2 years time? And that's really now that we need to not jump into OTAs or whatever distribution that may cost you more than your direct business or any other type of business.
And hotels right now have unique opportunity because everyone contacts hotels to find out what their policies are. So there is more direct contact with guests, even if they initially book through online travel agency. So why don't we use this opportunity to capture that, to build relationship with customers and to capture and build that guest loyalty as well?
I think digital marketing and revenue management are so closely aligned that it can afford not to pay it proper attention and have a plan that dovetails very nicely in with your digital strategy. So that's what we do. We work closely with digital.
Do you see any new segments coming up, growing in the future that we may have tried to forget in the past and suddenly we're going to start looking at them again?
I think Olga.
You had your views, Olga, on that, yes.
Well, I was talking to colleagues, especially with general managers. I think they're all a little bit anxious and worried. And of course, looking at all the opportunities and options, even if it was FITs that in the past they didn't want to work with. And I think it's, yes, there are risks attached to it as well. And I don't think it is a market I personally, unfortunately, I've seen too many examples where losing direct business to FITs. But some general managers are considering going to that route, at least maybe for some time being. What I would say is maybe that's a way to get some of your domestic market as well. And I would look into maybe more working with FIT, sort of traditional travel agencies. They still have one or two high street kind of places, the offices, because they have actually, so that will be, I would focus more on Ireland and Scotland. So staycations, domestic market, and the risks with those agencies are much lower as well. And it is based on more on relationships, so, and you can control much better as well. So I think some of the hotels possibly will look into FITs, maybe more than in the past they wanted to.
One of the questions I was thinking about was just how hotels work with the GDS. You know, typically with small hotels, they'll say, oh, it's just about the corporate business, when actually it's a portal for every travel agent on the planet, and you've got access to them. So it's about representation and how you tap into that market, how you work with partnerships, and whether small hotels should be looking at the GDS as an opportunity to stimulate demand in the future. And I think it's a real opportunity now to start to learn and understand about how these distribution platforms work, and really put a plan together that includes distribution platforms that you've never thought about before. And
I agree with you as well, especially Susanne, because people always look at GDS as an expensive tool to have, an expensive acquisition. However, we've seen over the past years that, you know, we do get a lot of volume from GDS, and you're right, it's gone from being mainly corporate now to being leisure as well. And people, I think hoteliers especially, need to remember that American Airlines, Sabre, all these guys, everyone books flights plus hotels on this. So sometimes you're booking on aerlingus.com or Ryanair.com or wherever could actually fall into these buckets, because this is where FITs also buy your rates from, you know. So, and again, traditionally people would always price GDS a lot higher, so you'd have a markup on your rate plans for GDS to cover some of your commission costs or your offset costs. So I think that's something people need to be mindful of now, is that, you know, you should treat every platform as the same, but really investigate who's the best partner for you. If you're doing this, if you're not using GDS before, there's a wealth of partners out there. If you have GDS at the moment, check it. Get your partner to check your hotel versus your comp set. Do a proper SWOT analysis, because you never get to see what GDS actually looks like. It's actually an old-fashioned computer that sometimes shows pictures, sometimes doesn't, and it's all keywords. So look at the keywords. Look at the companies that are nearby you, like, just say, for instance, if you're in Hammersmith, L'Oreal, Virgin, all these big players. Make sure you mark them on your GDS that you are nearby, and landmarks, because that's how, you know, people sitting in travel offices like Google and Facebook and pretty much even domestic markets will say, I want to be near Kensington Palace. They'll put in KENNP and it'll bring up all the hotels in that area that are there. So it's about being smart now. And I think FITs, everyone's going to sign up with them. It's about finding the right partner, and it's about finding the right, as Olga said, it's about giving the right rate though as well, because you don't want to be flooded with these massive allocations, or that you won't be able to close out, because we're going to go back to that. Or if you're going to do the guarantee where the OTA actually prepays you for everything and then utilizes that space, make sure you fight to get the best rate. You are in a recovery. As Ali said, you need to be able to focus on ADR and not just occupancy. And these guys will just try to get you to go for occupancy and volume strategies at the moment, just to help claw back the business and get you the right business, if that's what they want to say about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the FIT is a segment, can be a slippery slope. There's a lot of benefits for hotels in the immediate short term in terms of cash flow, but it can be super tricky if you really don't know what you're doing, and you don't know how to play the game. It can be really tricky to keep them on your side. And I think the combination of some of the scenarios we've seen before with some of the FIT operators, and the challenge of renewed aggression over rate parity is going to be a really, really difficult balance to get right in the future. I know that owners are going to be really, really focused on cash, and revenue managers are going to be focused on managing life easily to a certain extent with the best possible outlook. And
sales teams will be focusing on completely something else, on the pipeline, for example, and the promise to deliver something which may not materialize.
Good. We were just talking about the OTAs. So we have a question from Paloma. Thank you, Paloma, for asking, what are the main policy changes from OTA? What have you seen lately? Anyone wants to take this question?
Is that in terms of the cancellation programs?
Yeah, I guess that's what.
Well, both Booking and Expedia have had very, very similar force majeure initiatives. So Booking called it force majeure, and Expedia called it the Global Cancellation Waiver Program. Both of them are operating under different timelines, but basically the situation now is pretty similar, in as much as anything that was booked before, and it's better to have a look at the extranet, but with both of them, it's anything, well, Expedia is a date in March, and Khristina, do you know the booking.com date? But basically they're saying that for certain bookings before March the 19th, that's it, their force majeure will be in operation until the end of April, and in Booking's case, in Expedia's case, it's slightly later, through to May. But they are now starting to relax various, certainly the force majeure has now been relaxed. Expedia also had a policy whereby if you had any prepaid rates within a 60-day period from, which was early March through to end of April, May, they would be basically either auto-converting those or not showing those rates. So if you actually did work off on complete prepaid rate policies, you wouldn't actually be seen. So that really hit the apartment sector quite badly, because a lot of apartments tend to be typically prepaid, and so a lot of apartment style units found that they weren't actually available on Expedia or couldn't be seen. They had no visibility on Expedia. That's now changing again, and that change was brought in this week with amendments to the partially refundable and fully refundable rates. But the recommendation would be to go have a look at the extranets and the policies, and typically they send by email at every time.
Right. Thank you, Ali. Paloma, I hope you got a very extensive answer from Ali, but do go and check the extranets. Great. Just before we move into the last subject, I just want to, so a question from Guillermo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name rightly. You're asking about bringing revenue management to the rest of the department. So we will keep this question for next week. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about. A question from Monica. What's your opinion on travel policy? Don't you think hotels should redesign their spaces and room according to the safety measure we need to apply going forward?
I think it's funny because there's hotels that have actually been trying to do refurbs this year. A lot of people were actually going to plan refurbs for late 2020, early 2021. So I do think that will change their plans essentially on what they're going to do. I think for the next while, we all need to take into account the word social distancing. And I think we need to space out our restaurants based on that. And I think we need to be very careful about how many people we have in certain areas. So redesign is probably very key, especially for meeting and events hotels, big conference hotels and wedding events over the coming months, and especially how we deal with breakfast. If it's a buffet breakfast, what is that layout? Because currently at the moment for any hotel that's operating, buffets aren't there, and it's all just room service being dropped to the rooms.
Anybody else on this question?
I think there'll be a lot of certainly in bars and restaurants and F&B spaces moving forward. Yeah, definitely table spacing. The social distancing policies will have to be addressed within all public spaces, and also guests demanding a completely contactless experience. So contactless check-in, contactless doors. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's great as well. I think this pushes people to the virtual reality world a lot quicker than what we were actually ready for. Because to be honest with you, if you're in a brand, you'll have contactless keys, and a lot of your pretty much contactless for a lot of it. And I know that some brands are introducing almost that you can virtually check in on your phone. I know a lot of PMSs support this as well, which is great because you're able to do that whole seamless in and seamless out, which is always we've kind of ideally wanted for our corporate clients. And I think this will actually allow people to look at their systems, what they use in the future. Just like the banks have had to increase the tap and pay, I think we will also have to change how we operate. And I think it's a great way, Ali, that you said it, because I just think it's really pushing us miles ahead where China and Asia have been for ages, where they've got these hotels that it's a virtual, everything is virtual. You know, you have very little contact with a human.
While we are,
I still prefer that. No, go on.
While we're talking about technology, you started, Ali and Khristina. What technology is actually helping you at the moment, or you feel in the future the hotels are going to invest more in order to support their revenue growth? What would be your recommendation? Anyone interested?
Oh, I'm really sorry. I wasn't listening. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
In terms of technology,
I'm listening now. Repeat the question.
What would be the technology needed for the hotels in the future?
Technology needed for.
What would you recommend? Let me rephrase.
Okay.
At the moment, there's thousands of webinars made by technology companies to hoteliers, yeah? And it's good to see here that we don't really talk about this, but let's just imagine what would be the best technology at the moment they should be looking at? Not necessarily a company name, but more a service that would make their life easier in the future.
I think certainly, you probably can't answer this without stepping on the webinar kind of button, if you like. But certainly now that people are more used to, more used to working from home and having the webinar scenario or in that environment. There are better ways of doing it and far more technologically robust ways of delivering those. So video conferencing, for example, I think in hotels, you can still create that environment where you could actually probably pull in multiple people from different regions while still providing that kind of service. And I think in the past it's been slightly counterintuitive for hotels to offer it, primarily because they say, why would I offer that if I can't have people coming to my hotel? But I think you have to get out of that mindset that people are not necessarily going to be willing to travel that much in the future, and there will be restrictions on people traveling. So vulnerable people won't be able to travel, but it doesn't mean to say that they can't work for you. There are multiple reasons why people are classed as vulnerable. They might be looking after children that are really ill. They might be having cancer treatment, but perfectly able to work. So there's lots of different reasons why you might want to include some kind of like more robust video conferencing offering, because you can tell that we've had these horror stories about the lady who was on the webinar and went to the loo and didn't close down her camera. I've got friends who've been on meetings and their wives have been walking naked from the bathroom in the background. I mean, it's all happening, and we don't want that to happen forevermore. So that would be one thing that I think needs to happen. And certainly things like things that have been in perhaps not technology, but certainly a new business model is for hotels to look at their F&B offerings as takeaways, where certainly in different countries that's worked really well. And certainly in the UK, there are lots of government advisory sites on how to actually transform your F&B offering into a takeaway, which does actually include having a lot more technology to support it. So those are a couple of examples with a few wicked stories on the end. But anybody else want to chip in? Just shut me up for a while.
I think it would be great to have sort of one system that manages all communication with customers in one place, because right now we have to use multiple platforms for that. And I don't think yet we figured out one kind of platform that will distribute to all. And I think it's something we will still emerge. We'll see emerging, or maybe taking just being maybe introduced to hotels more than before.
I think there's PMSs who support that, and I think we'll see the PMS world change face drastically over the next few months and even next few years. There's been some really up and coming technology companies who we all know all their staff are on furlough at the moment or on leave or have been let go. And it's been very sad to see that these guys who've come into the industry to be game changers are now, letting staff go. But I think everything will be in one tool, as Olga said. And I definitely think that would be prices, that will be analytical, that will be your guests, that will be everything, your digital marketing, your social media, absolutely everything will be covered. And I think that's what we want, though. We've always wanted that. It's just that no one has been able to deliver it at an affordable price. And I think that's one thing as well people need to realize. It's the affordability. It's how much we can actually spend on these tools. And is it a case that we can actually pay it off over a period of time now, rather than actually bulk paying everything at the start? Because that's something that I think we need to be as well as flexible on all these things. Because if you look at, STR, for instance, in a lot of cases, and brands have actually waived their fees for 2 months. So, I think we need to be a little bit more mindful of that. And I think having, even just now, for people, invest in a good rate shopping tool that's actually going to give you the right data. And I'm saying it the right data, because I do know there's people here that are online who actually work for shopping tools at the moment. A lot of them just scrape. We need to be able to get to the nitty gritty. We need to be able to see members deals. Some support it, some don't. And we need to be able to see what our comp set is doing in the members deals, not just what we're doing. We want to know that. We want to see all these hidden special offers so that we can actually make the right strategic price decision, or we can increase or certain segments or certain rates. And that will help properties a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you, Khristina.
More visibility, definitely. Right.
Thank you so much, ladies. I'm so glad that we managed to cover a little bit of technology, but I think we're going to need a specific session for that. Unfortunately, this is the end. I'm actually quite sad. I enjoyed this exchange today. So a big thank you to everybody who participated in this panel, everybody who asked questions. We're looking forward to seeing you next week. Next week is going to be a subject which is very, very close to my heart. Stop the silos, work together between sales, marketing, and revenue managers. So that's going to be fantastic. For everybody, please follow Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech on LinkedIn for further news. Tomorrow, there is a very exciting and a weekly Women Live on social media, marketing, communication, and travel blogging. Have a fantastic time. Stay safe and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Who are we missing?